Jacob Reed stepped out into the early morning light, the wide plains stretching away from him on every side. His boots crunched softly in the dry grass. His faithful dog, Scout, trotted by his side, tail sweeping low in contentment. The ranch had been Jacob's world for years. The barn, the windmill that creaked in the breeze, the cattle grazing against a backdrop of open sky. But recently, something deep in his heart had changed. He felt restless, as if the land around him held more than he had discovered so far. The sun hovered just above the horizon, casting long shadows across the field. Jacob inhaled the crisp air. He looked across his property and beyond, to a ridge he had scarcely noticed before. There, half hidden by long golden grass, stood an old mill, a structure that time seemed to have forgotten. The wooden slats were weather-worn. The wheel that once turned with purpose now stood still. A faded red arrow, almost comically large, pointed toward it in his mind. But the real arrow, the one he felt inside, said, "Explore." A new beginning. Jacob had purchased the old mill for $1. Just one measly, symbolic dollar. The seller, an elderly neighbor whose family had owned the mill for generations, offered Jacob the property almost as a gift. The mill no longer produced flour or ground grain. It had sat idle for years, its paddles rusted, the troughs cracked. But to Jacob, it whispered promise. Why did he do it? Some days, he could not answer. The ranch was already enough work. The cattle, the fences, the seasons. Yet, something about that quiet structure pulled at him. Maybe it was the idea of giving something old a new purpose. Maybe it was simply that he and Scout needed a change of scenery. They needed something beyond the cattle and the routine. Scout rested his head on Jacob's boot. Jacob scratched behind Scout's ears. "All right, boy," he said in a low voice, "let's see what's inside." First steps inside the mill. Jacob pushed open the heavy wooden door. A faint groan echoed. Dust motes drifted in the shafts of light that broke through the cracks in the plank walls. The smell was a mixture of dry wood, old water, rust, and something deeper, almost like memory. Scout padded in behind him, ears perked, sniffing the air. The floorboards creaked under Jacob's weight. He shone his flashlight over rafters and beams, peering at the old mechanisms. The wheel outside, once powered by water, stood silent. The trough that would have carried water was cracked. Everything looked in disrepair. He realized the problem. If the mill was going to be more than just an odd curiosity, it would need work. Lots of work. He would need to clean, restore, possibly rewire some parts. But more than that, he would need to find purpose here. What could this place become? Scout paused at a corner where the light from Jacob's flashlight fell upon something strange. A small hatch in the floor, half concealed by a rotting plank. Jacob knelt. He pried open the hatch. Underneath was a dark space, a cavity that wind and time had forgotten. A faint shimmer of something metallic caught his eye. The problem deepens. Jacob felt a mix of excitement and cautiousness. He did not know what that metal object was. He imagined rats, collapse, mold. He imagined the worst. He wondered, why was there a hidden space here? Was it part of the old machinery? Or something else? He lifted the object carefully. It was a small box, iron but rusting. The lid was hinged and barely held together. He opened it. Inside lay old documents, scribbled notes, sketches of the mill, maps of the surrounding land and water channels. Alongside them was something that made Jacob's heart skip. A copper key, old and ornate, with a symbol engraved on it, a wheel inside a circle, the symbol of the mill's original owners. He remembered hearing about them as a child. Jacob sat back and exhaled. Scout whined softly. Jacob whispered, "What have you found, old friend?" His mind raced. The problem now was not only restoring the mill, there was a mystery here. But he wasn't sure he was ready for a mystery. He still had ranch chores. He still had cattle to check. He still worried about storms and fences. Now this, a hidden past beneath the mill. Was he digging into something he didn't understand? He closed the box gently, set it aside, and sealed the hatch back. He stood and rubbed his eyes. The morning sun was higher now. The old mill seemed to gleam faintly in its light, as if it were waking. Jacob patted Scout on the shoulder. "We'll come back to this," he said. "Let's get some work done for now. Building purpose." Over the next few weeks, Jacob and Scout made the mill part of their daily rhythm. In the early hours, Jacob would ride out to the fields, check the fences, feed the cattle. Then he'd shift to the mill, sweeping the floor, removing decayed wood, replacing broken boards, greasing the hinges, and examining the old water channels to see if they could be repaired. Scout, ever by his side, would sit on a sagging beam and watch as Jacob hammered, sanded, and planed. The mill slowly transformed. The interior cleared of debris. The old wheel remained still but looked proud again. Jacob fixed cracks in the trough and patched sections of the wooden sluice. He planted ivy up the outside wall, not to cover or hide it, but to show that nature and renewal could coexist. During this time, Jacob's mind often drifted to the old box and key. He would find moments, late at night after the chores, to open the box again and study the documents. There were sketches of water flow, maps showing hidden springs and channels under the land. There were old letters referencing the reservoir beneath the wheel, and the secret chamber for the key. Jacob puzzled. Was this simply an old business ledger, or something more, perhaps an underground water storage, or even a hidden vault? Meanwhile, the ranch itself began to feel different. The air felt lighter. Jacob felt less trapped by routine. Scout's cheerful presence felt like a trusted companion in something bigger now. And the mill, once a symbol of decay, became a symbol of possibility. The gentle twist. One afternoon, after a sudden summer rain, Jacob noticed something he had overlooked. Water trickled beneath the base of the mill. He looked closer. Slight erosion had revealed a stone slab partially buried at the foundation. His heart beat a little faster. Using his tools, he carefully removed the gravel and dirt around the slab. It was heavy, weather-worn. He pried up one corner. Underneath was a shallow cavity, a stone chamber, large enough for a man to crouch. Jacob's breath caught. Scout barked softly and circled the opening. Jacob shined his flashlight down. The chamber was empty except for one thing, an old wooden beam across the center, and at its end, a chain heavy with rust. Jacob reached down and pulled carefully. The chain rattled. The beam shifted. Something inside the darkness dropped with a dull sound. Jacob jerked back. His mind raced. This was hidden for a reason, he whispered to Scout. He shone the light lower and saw a metal grate set into the floor of the chamber. The grate had the same symbol as the key, a wheel inside a circle. The key fit. Jacob's hand trembled as he inserted the key. With a click, the grate lifted and revealed a staircase spiraling downward. Jacob took a deep breath. He turned to Scout. Come on, old boy. Scout shifted and followed. Together, they descended into the earth. The air grew cooler. The walls were stone, damp. At the bottom, a wide cavern opened. It was not large, perhaps 15 by 20 feet, but what drew Jacob's attention was the water. In the center of the chamber was a pool of clear water, lit by a small shaft of light from above. It looked like a hidden spring, shimmering in the gloom. On the far side, steps led down into the water. Jacob touched the surface and felt that it was deep, cold. The documents had hinted at hidden springs, but Jacob had not believed it. Yet here it was. Scout sat quietly at the edge, ears flicking. Jacob knelt and looked around. There were old tools, iron buckets, wooden crates, remnants of long-forgotten work. And carved into the stone wall, faint but visible, the same wheel in a circle symbol, repeated several times. It seemed this chamber had been built as part of the mill's original design, perhaps to harness the spring, to power the wheel, or to store water in dry seasons. Jacob felt a surge of emotion. He realized that what seemed like a worthless rusty mill for $1 actually held something extraordinary, a hidden reservoir beneath his land. The problem he had faced, restoring a decaying building, now shifted into something bigger, preserving a hidden natural spring, a legacy of the land, a chance to connect past and present. Reflection and acceptance. Back on the surface, Jacob closed the grate and set the hatch in place. He rode back to the house as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with warm gold and violet. Scout perched on the back of the buckboard, ears flapping in the breeze. Jacob felt heavy in his body with exhaustion but light in his heart with discovery. He sat on the porch, watching twilight deepen. He poured a cup of coffee and looked toward the mill. It stood quietly, dignified now, no longer just a decaying relic but a link between yesterday and tomorrow. He realized that his restless feeling had been telling him something, that the land had more story to tell. He thought of the ranch routines, the cattle, the fences, the feed. They were still there, but now there was the mill and the spring, a second layer of purpose. He could see himself restoring the mill not just physically but honoring the hidden spring. He could imagine community. Local children coming to learn about the old water system, maybe visitors interested in historical mills. He could imagine the spring being used to irrigate a garden beside the mill, creating a quiet oasis next to the open plains. In the weeks that followed, Jacob shared his discovery with a trusted friend, Mary Bennett, who had studied local history. Mary came out one evening, carrying lanterns, and she walked beside Jacob and Scout to the mill. They climbed down into the chamber. Mary's eyes widened. "Jacob," she said softly, "this is remarkable. Few people know this was here." She helped Jacob document the chamber, photograph the spring, map the underground channels. The community became aware. A small historical grant was offered. Jacob accepted. He used the funds to install safe steps, railings, and lighting in the mill, so visitors could learn and see the hidden spring. He kept the restoration respectful, preserving the aged wood and iron, leaving the rust and patina in place as reminders of time. One bright morning, Jacob stood at the crest of the hill near the mill. Scout sat at his feet, tongue lolling happily. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grass. The wheel on the mill still did not turn, but that no longer mattered. The meaning had shifted. The mill was no longer about grinding grain but about memory and discovery, about connection and renewal. Jacob smiled. He thought of the day he bought the mill for $1. He had worried. Could he restore it? Could he find value? The value turned out not just in dollars but in something deeper, in purpose, in heritage, in the land's voice being heard. Scout wagged his tail. Jacob crouched and hugged him. "We did good," he said. Evening settled. The sky faded to lavender and rose. The mill glowed softly in that light. Jacob walked back to the house, Scout padding beside him. He paused and looked back once more at the mill and the hidden chamber beneath. He felt content. He felt calm. The restlessness had gone. Because sometimes, what looks like a problem, a rusty old building, a question mark, you turn it into a possibility. And you walk through the door, even when it creaks. And you follow your dog, your companion, into the unknown. And you find something unimaginable, yet perfectly fitting. Jacob stepped inside the house. He set his mug on the table. He listened to the quiet settling around him. And in that silence, he heard the promise of tomorrow, of restoration, of legacy, of land reclaimed. He closed his eyes for a moment, and Scout laid his head gently across Jacob's lap. The end.